go now, just fly away. Oh, just fly away. Please, little birdie, fly away. Oh, said I see you there with the same old look on your face, and it's telling me that I was wrong. You put me in my place. Well, I'm sorry that you see it that way. Disagree to disagree, but it's all good. I've got 20 left. Let's roll it, let's burn trees.
Step away for a moment.
Fly away, little bird, just put on, say just me. Oh, fly away, little bird. Said just go on, baby, it's not over. You go fly away. Oh, fly away. Goodbye, my dear. Oh, fly. Since I don't know where you are. Yay! I like that song. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Why are you that way? Think back. What made you that way? Now you do all you can to keep yourself alive. Keep your head above water. Just keep your eyes. And you're wondering when your day will come, when you will be happy, when you will feel better. Sing everything.
Welcome, we're listening to Sweet Sounds of Jarrod Scott, starting
someday soon. Oh, say someday soon. Oh, it will be better. Someday, say yes. Someday will be better.
welcome. We'll be starting in a moment. Welcome, you're listening to our panelist Jarrod Scott performing chat. Feel free. We'd love to know who you are, what you're looking to get out of today, what communities you're representing, whatever you'd like to share.
To know that you're here with me. Oh, here with me. You went back to Jersey today.
Friends, we're starting in a moment.
Looking for a chicken, you got the body where reach. Then you laid in the sun for 3 straight days, looking like a beach. You're feeling in the days of the haze that we just got delivered. Feeling like a Hannibal, the hunger getting delivered. Feeling like village and villages with my whole quality. So it doesn't matter, you need to just listen to the follow these. With the klepto, acoustic, the knowledge that we spitting. You think when you think sweet kid. New pace and dumb it down, but I'm finished. I'm the same, you feel so. It's so good to know that you're here with me. Oh, with me. So good to know that you're here. So good, so good, so good, so good.
Ooh, we got Vermont in the house. Welcome in. All right, folks, welcome to Cultural Identity and Beyond. We're going to start off with a little art warm-up. I know we have some people still flowing in. Beautiful music by Jarrod Scott here. Thank you so much. You'll be hearing Jarrod as one of our panelists today. Very excited to be here. Yeah. All right. So we're going to do a little art warm up together. I'm sure we'll have more friends joining this room and being in community with us in a moment. But I wanted to feature artwork by another one of our panelists, the incredible Hanzi Han. Please gaze upon this art piece. You could breathe it in, breathe it out. And I'd love for you to meditate on what do you see? What do you feel? What emotions does this work bring to mind? What landscapes, colors, flavors, people, food, memories drift into the frame of your mind? And I would love for you to create a little poem if you wish, or maybe just put these words, these fragments into a refrigerator magnet poem and share it in the chat. Let's see what's on everyone's hearts today, inspired by this piece. I'll give you a couple of minutes to do that. While you're doing that, I just want to share that today is being transcribed by rev.com. So there are closed captions available. If you would like through Zoom, you can go to the More button and turn those on so you can see them. We're really grateful we're able to offer that accessibility for folks. And today is also being recorded so that folks who cannot be here with us in this moment can be with us later. I'm excited to see what people create. If you want to share a full poem, you absolutely can, but you can also just share words, emotions, things that are flowing in for you. Beautiful. We have our first little poem in the chat by Romana Lee. Medicine, healing, body, stable stream of life force and energy brings movement to carry us forward. Thank you. Love it. Love it, love it. Ooh, is this a haiku, Grisel? We have ancient power stance looking directly at you. Move towards the future. I love that. We see other words and observations flowing in. Jarrod sees drive. I love that. I love that people see movement and drive and change. Michael says tears of armor, power and sadness, walking quickly. Vincent says lifeline. Ooh, Jarrod also sees determination, forward movement. Ooh, we got another haiku in the chat from Anna. Color, flow, vibing, kind movement showing up now. Happy to connect. I love that. We see so many different emotions popping up in the same image. It's cool. Quentin says, a body both at its beginning and end, a cycle. Ooh, I love that. This is very cool. And we'll actually get to hear from Hanzi as part of our panel later. And Hanzi, if there's anything you want to share about this piece in the chat, that would be really cool. And all of our panelists, please feel free to share anything that you want our folks to connect with. If you have links, if you have event pages, you can always pop those in. And I'll be happy to share them out afterwards as well, if you want to send them to me later. We'll take another minute here to look at this piece and be in community together. If you're just joining us, we are preparing ourselves for this panel by engaging with the art of our panelists. We opened up the day with a song by Jarrod Scott, and now we are looking at this piece by Hanzi Han and sharing our impressions, our thoughts, our feelings, our poetry. Ooh, we have Susan in the chat. Defined lines and structure, a sense of well-being and serenity. Beautiful. How do you get your text bigger like that, Susan? That's so cool. I love how accessible that is. It's really dynamic. I got to look that up later. Share the Zoom hacks with me.
Yeah, it's a Zoom hack.
Is that an extension you have to add, or you can just change that?
It's all in the advanced settings. So I've gone in there and I've played around with it a little bit. I don't know if it's available on the free version, but definitely in the paid version.
I love that. That's great for everyone to know here. I know we're all in Zoom spaces all the time. All right, and then we have our artist Hanzi sharing in the chat. I'm just going to quickly uplift their comment. Here we go. I'm really happy to read how people interpret the work. It is a screen print of an old Chinese anatomical model that shows qi pathways and meridians. The characters are actually a translation of the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. Oh, I have felt that many times before. It's really exciting to see people make these connections. That's so beautiful. Thank you. Wonderful. So we're going to be diving in. But first, I would love to obviously introduce myself and introduce our organization for folks who maybe don't know us. You're going to meet us really quickly. We're going to meet our panelists, and we're going to dive into some discussion about our cultural identities and beyond. And we're also going to have a Q&A. So Michael just posted in the chat some technical stuff. Michael is also your tech go-to. If you have any needs or questions, you can direct message Michael for help. And you can also share any questions you have for the panelists in the chat, and Michael will be watching. Thanks, Michael. All right. So for folks who are not familiar with YA Young Audiences, we are an organization that empowers artists and young learners all through New Jersey and Eastern Pennsylvania. We're a chapter of a national organization, Young Audiences, as well. And we do work primarily in schools, but all over the region to bring different art forms, dance in this picture, music, visual arts, theater, literary arts, to students from all backgrounds. So you can learn more about us at yanjep.org, and you can learn a little bit more about our history. I just put a little blurb here. So if you didn't know about us, now you do. And I am the Artist Services Manager at YA, as well as a teaching artist. So this is Roots to Canvas, the organization's BIPOC Affinity Group. And we are organizing this event. We're just getting the ball rolling. And these are our members right here. We have Michael, who is our wonderful tech guru today. We have Carrie, who will be our timekeeper for our panel. We have Summer Dawn, that's me. And we have Quentin, our marketing guru. And so our mission is to cultivate a supportive community that empowers artists and educators of color to explore every facet of their artistic expression while celebrating their diversity, creativity, and individuality. And we're so happy to offer this panel as our first initiative towards this mission, and so happy that you could be here with us. All right, so we're going to meet our panelists, and as we do this, they're also going to be telling us a bit about themselves, the kind of art they make, and what communities and cultures they're representing today. So first off, I want to introduce myself. I am the facilitator for today. As I mentioned, I'm a theater and literary arts teaching artist with YA. I'm also a songwriter and singer and have dabbled in all sorts of arts. I'm also the founder and director of In Full Color, an organization that empowers women of color through education and the arts. And I've been Artist Services Manager, supporting our incredible roster of artists at YA since last June. I'm really happy to be here. So first up, we have Jarrod. Jarrod's bio and information are on the screen. But Jarrod, I'd love for you to come off mute and tell us a little bit about yourself, your art, and what cultures and communities you are representing today.
Certainly. Hello, everyone. Thank you all for having me. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Summer, for the invitation. Thank you, Michael, for the recommendation. Being a part of this, being a part of the community is just fantastic. I think this is an extremely important thing that's happening through YA. So thank you for having me. Yeah, my name is Jarrod. Like it says there, I'm a teaching artist. That's how I got involved with YA. But currently, I'm becoming more of a director. I was an entertainer and singer my entire life. I got into the arts through theater. And that's how I approach all of my endeavors, all of my emotional endeavors, all of my stage endeavors, everything like that comes from a theater standpoint. And I am a mixed young man. So thank you for the young part. Thank you for allowing me to have that. I represent the Black community, and I represent the Russian-Irish community, strangely, on the other side. It's I get to educate a little bit more about the Russian and the Irish side through my mom, because it's a very interesting conversation you get to have looking like this and being Russian, Irish, and Black. So those are the communities that I get to represent. And, you know, it leads to a lot of interesting conversation and a lot of education. I find humor is a nice entrance way to all that stuff too.
Beautiful. Thank you for bringing your whole self here today, Jarrod. And we're excited to hear more from you. Next up, we have Dr. Grisel, Yolanda Acosta, a good friend of mine. Grisel, can you tell us a bit about yourself and your art and your cultures and communities?
Yes. Hi, everyone. I'm extremely happy to be here as well. Thank you, Summer, for inviting me to be here. And thanks to the whole team. This is a great project, so I feel really honored to be a part of this panel. I represent a few communities. So my dad was born in Barranquilla, Colombia. And my mother was born in Caibarien, Cuba. So Cuban and Colombian. My dad was a Black man. My mom mixed with a bunch of different things. So I identify as Afro-Latina. And I was the first one in my family who was born in the United States. So I grew up in Chicago and then came out to the East Coast and have lived in New York and New Jersey since 1999 for the most part. Art, I write everything. So I write poetry, I write creative nonfiction, I write short fiction, a lot of sci-fi. I write scholarly essays. popular culture essays, like all kinds of things. I write songs. So just generally a writer. And I came into that very young, but I think that might be bleeding into a future question. So I'll leave it at that, but really, really happy to be here.
Beautiful. Thank you, Grisel. Grisel's one of my In Full Color alumni, and we also have Susan in the chat. So I have family here. I feel very happy. Thanks, Grisel. All right, last but definitely not least, we have the incredible Hanzi Han. Hanzi, can you tell us about yourself and your art and your culture and communities?
Yeah. So hi, everyone. I'm Hanzi. I use they, them pronouns. The communities I'm representing are Chinese American. I'm specifically American born Chinese. I was born in Oklahoma, of all places, but I actually grew up in New Jersey. No memories of Oklahoma, though I'd love to visit at some point. But yeah, Jersey, born and raised. Well, not born, raised. Yeah, so in terms of my art practice, I work primarily in digital illustration, although I have a lot of other practices, printmaking, screen printing, as you've seen, animation. And for me, my cultural identity definitely informs and like shows up in my work, either through subject matter and themes or also formally in the media I use. So I'll incorporate, elements that might be inspired from Chinese calligraphy or mark making inspired by ink wash painting.
I love it. And your art is incredible. We actually have another piece by Hanzi to kind of mark the beginning of our panel. I love this. This is a message I stand behind. Believe in yourself. You are the big fish. Thank you for creating this piece that speaks to my heart, Hanzi, and I'm sure to everyone here. Beautiful, beautiful. I'm going to stop the share so we can see each other's faces and be fully in community with each other. Hey, y'all. So we are going to, let me try to spotlight everybody because I like to do that. Let me see if I can do like multiple spotlights. I can. Look at this. The wonder of Zoom. Hey, y'all. How you doing? So some of you started sharing a little bit about this, but I would love to know a little bit more about how you got into the arts and like how your culture has weaved in and out of your practice.
Sure thing. I can start. I skipped a whole bunch in that introduction section, so I guess I can recap it as we go along. Sort of like everything I was going to say kind of bled anyway. My father was Southern born on Big Mill Plantation. My mother, like I said, was Russian Irish. So when they got divorced, it was a single parent household, wonderful family dynamic, but my mom didn't have a babysitter when she needed to work overtime. So musical theater and community theater provided adults and responsible people and kids. So that was wonderful. It was free, it was close, and somebody could drive me home. And I happened to have people in the community who were also involved in theater. So when I started to come up, it was during a time when, it sounds so cliche, but I didn't have anyone to look up to in theater. That was me. I didn't really. We had Savion Tapping, you know what I mean? We had Brian Stokes in Ragtime at the time. We had, when I got a little older, I think like Tay was in Rent, you know what I mean? But aside from that, all we really had was the Tin Pan Alley stuff and the stuff in the late 70s that they were doing black versions of. And there was not much theater that was colored. There was not much theater for colored people. So when I started to do theater, it was, and I grew and started to find myself, I started finding role models and inspirations, I guess, elsewhere, not so much in the theater community, that allowed me to bring a lot of other elements into theater that helped me then as a teacher when I got a little bit older, because it was less about musical theater flash and flash, because I didn't have that as an inspiration. It became more of a grounded sort of thing, which when I started to grow out of theater and became more of a songwriter and more of a director, it really just helped round out every sort of idea I had, just being, I don't want to say multifaceted, but just having my head everywhere. Thankfully, because I was in a single parent household, theater was there to catch me.
Beautiful. Hanzi or Grisel?
I'll go. So the question was, how did I get into the arts, right? So I actually, it's very, very strange because neither of my parents are artists. I do have family, extended family from Cuba that kind of like to work with their hands and such, and Colombia too. My grandmother was an incredible weaver. So I think I just started finding this affinity for the arts when I was really young. When I saw a puppet show, I would try to recreate the puppet show in my household using all my little craft tools. I was trying to make books before I could even write a full sentence. So I would staple paper together and make the book of W's because there were just so many books in my household. So I think because my parents were these artistic intellectuals, I was just kind of mimicking everything that I saw around me. And my mom was always taking me to the theater and to the Art Institute in Chicago and other museums. I absolutely fell in love with the Museum of Contemporary Art, which had the really weird stuff. And I really started out as someone who was trying to combine visual art and writing as well. So it was just kind of this obsession of mine as a child who was a latchkey kid. I did not necessarily go to an arts organization, but in my home, I was always putting on performances and trying to write plays and trying to write books. So once I got to maybe like middle school and high school, that's when I started seeing all the other kids who were really artistically inclined and just became obsessed over them. They were my heroes. So I was like, okay, let me jump into the punk movement. Let me start dancing via the burgeoning house music movement in Chicago. So it was just, I was sort of naturally inclined to do this. And I'll bring up the cultural stuff later.
You're rationing it. I love it. Hanzi.
Yeah, my exposure to art started pretty early. I mean, I think every kid draws, like, when you're like 4 or 5, even earlier. So I was very grateful. My parents, well, okay, so I think this is a common experience for a lot of Asian kids is that their parents will either they'll put them into extracurriculars, like you will go to art class or you're going to learn violin, and they don't intend for you to make that your thing. Um, so those things are meant to be, supplementary, discipline, make you well-rounded and whatnot. But my sister, she was actually my inspiration. I saw her drawing a lot. This might be a very familiar story for my Asian peers who are either the older sibling or the younger sibling. She ended up having to, my parents steered her towards like, oh, focus on your studies, steered her away from art. So she followed the more conventional path of focusing on her studies, going to an Ivy League, securing a financially stable job. And I guess they were worn down by the time it came around to me because I was like, I'm going to do art. This is what I want to do. And so I ended up, I went to university for art. I went to Rhode Island School of Design, got a BFA in illustration. And then after that was like, yeah, I need more art school because I don't know what I'm doing. And I went actually to China, to the China Academy of Art, and got an MFA in contemporary art. And so now I'm back in here in the States, and I'm teaching art also. So teaching at Asian Arts Initiative and Fleischer Art Memorial, which are just 2 arts nonprofits here in Philadelphia.
That's so beautiful. What I love, and I want to uplift Michael's comment in the chat that if you want to turn your camera on, we'd love to see you. But I'm seeing everyone nod, regardless of their cultural background, being like, yeah, I made books as a kid. Yeah, I like needed an outlet when I was young. Yeah, I totally drew all over everything. And my parents told me that I need to be a doctor or whatever it was. That's what I feel. So it's beautiful to see us all in community. So I wanted to talk to all of y'all, especially as people of color, artists of color, educators of color, right? Some folks find art rooted in their cultural identity to be very grounding and necessary and rewarding. Some don't have any interest in that work, whether it's like not aligned with their interests or aesthetics, or they don't want to be boxed in by this construct of their cultural identity. Or, right, we always assume people are deeply connected to what we perceive them to be culturally, and that's not always the case. Culture is always so many different things intersecting. So I'm very curious. We have you guys are representing so many different experiences here. Where do y'all find yourselves? And I want to empower you to hop in if you feel like I got to share now, but we can also go in the same order that we've been going, if that helps everyone pace themselves. Jarrod, I'm sorry, I'm putting you on the spot.
Okay. Since you sent that question out, I've been thinking through it, and I think it becomes a lot deeper than what I want to do, and what I wish to do. I don't know this properly. As an artist and someone who feels the need to express themselves, my cultural identity, the fact that my grandmother was Geechee from down by the Carolinas, the fact that my father walked with no shoes on, didn't have a toothbrush till he joined the Navy, like those sorts of things like that. I don't feel the need to tell that story personally, but because of how I look and the field that I am in, the majority of what I do is in theater. And because of the demographic of the majority of theater, again, like you said, some people can assume that, we are the be-all end-all ambassador for our culture, and we are the one. So no matter what, it's kind of like, oh, there's one. So in my field, in my experience, I think a lot recently, I've been the one who, hey, we need consultation on Hairspray. Hey, who else is going to do Once on This Island? Hey, we're thinking about doing The Color Purple. Hey, we're going to do The Mountaintop. Like those sorts of things come to me, at least in my experience. I don't necessarily go out seeking things that tell my personal story, but I think there's enough art out there that I will have hands on, that I will be able to inject. We all do inject ourselves into something else that's not ours, any project that's not ours. So I think I've been doing it, but as I'm involved in more and more projects, I will be able to inject a little bit of, I want to say, our story, as opposed to my story, because my story is our story, and nothing new under the sun, as they say. So being able to do that with someone else's material for myself is satisfying. I have not been called to tell the big mill story, or to tell, anything personal. I think others do a wonderful job of that, and I'll be happy to assist them.
Beautiful, thank you. Grisel.
Yeah, let's stick to the order, because then I know when it's coming.
Okay, I'll just get you guys, I'll just push it off there terribly, and you'll clean it up very nicely.
No, not at all. So I'll be honest, I've had kind of this journey in terms of how I've brought my culture into my work. When I was younger, my parents were very, very proud to be Latinos and brought me up in a community where we had a lot of pride in being Latino. But there were other aspects of my upbringing that did not resonate with me. I was brought up in the church. My dad was a minister and therapist, and he was an activist and a great, great person. But I really did not appreciate singing songs, how great he is and my Lord. And it just felt very oppressive to me in terms of gender and my own personal identity and belief in what rules the universe. And I really, I had a lot of issues with gender. I had a lot of issues with what was supposed to excite us and be natural within that church environment. And I felt I had a right to my sexuality. And I felt I had a right to explore and be wild. And the church kept saying that, no, you're not supposed to be wild. You're supposed to be very self-contained and very proper. And that just didn't seem fun to me at all. So culturally, there was this kind of discord with wanting to connect to my Latinidad, but then also being upset by certain gender roles that I saw, and definitely ways in which race was discussed within the Latino culture. So initially, I just wanted to do art for art's sake, as they say, right? And that felt very shallow to me nonetheless, but that's kind of what I was doing initially before I was more informed and had learned more about the world and just read more. Then when I moved to New York, and I met these communities like the New Eurekan Poets, where they were very, very proud of their community. They were very feminist. They were definitely against any racist notions within the Latino community. They were speaking my language. So I really started to dive in deep into my cultural heritage and learn more about it and write about it in my work. But then there's also this, you know, punk inside of me, and this weirdo, and this person that wants to explore sci-fi themes. And so now I find myself going into other places. So the culture is obviously always going to inform my work, but I also want to be free to let my imagination soar to places that maybe the culture does not, right? That respectability politics stuff. I don't like that stuff. So anyway, that's where I'm at.
Hanzi.
Yeah. For me, I think like as a young person in the art spaces, I do think identity has certainly informed a lot of conversations and sort of, you know, guided, certainly for me, my own journey. For example, like when I went to China, I was there from 2017 to 2020. COVID happened, and I ended up getting finishing school remotely because, you know, COVID spread everywhere. But that whole journey and that sort of line of inquiry began sort of in undergrad. I had one sort of fateful encounter with a large body of contemporary Chinese art at the Met. It was the ink art exhibit. And for me, that experience was very changing because up until that point, my art education had been predominantly Western in nature, right? So you do very academic, formal studies. You paint, you do all these things, and here I was suddenly exposed to all these mediums that were, you know, they had a way of expressing, and they had a cultural tradition that was very different from what I had been familiar up until that point. And I had a point of entry just from growing up in a Chinese household. But again, my parents weren't artists. And so a lot of that was just me wanting to investigate for my own. And so I went to China, but my experience there was also like coming to terms with just how American I am. So like that there was that friction, right? The sort of cultural differences there made me sort of recognize what the Western elements are in my artwork, and then also the Chinese elements. And for me, it was like, I'm never going to be, you know, like the people that I met at the China Academy of Art. There's people, their whole study was just landscape painting, just calligraphy, and they're absolute masters of their craft. And they have growing up in that environment, a deep cultural understanding that I don't think I'll ever be able to approach. But from my unique position in the diaspora, I am drawing from different wells of culture. I have my own personal lived experience. I grew up on the internet, and so that's going to inform my art practice. Yeah.
I want to, so spoiler alert, people, we're very organized and we did send people ideas of the questions, but I'm going to deviate because art is adaptive. I noticed everyone shared a little bit about how like this Western mainstream, right, like white dominated kind of standards for all of your art forms had an influence in some way. Like you had to interact with that, whether it be through your training or your exposure. And I'm wondering like just how that tension, along with all of this other cultural stuff, y'all are dealing with, you know, being multiracial, being a first generation, all of this other stuff. How does that like interact with that mainstream?
I think I'll just give you a broad example. I worked in the cruise industry as an entertainer for about a decade. Fantastic job, wonderful. I had to work with every culture you could possibly think of. Cruised every continent, and so we had passengers from every continent. So that was a major influence in me building my shows. Let's say, for instance, every 2 weeks by 2 weeks by 2 weeks, I'm thinking about the demographic that I'm catering to when I'm building my songs, writing my songs, when I'm writing my banter in between. So taking that off of a ship and putting it on land where I'm working in Red Bank, New Jersey, which is a completely different demographic than Asbury Park, New Jersey, which is a completely different demographic than Jersey City, New Jersey. And then I have to go do something in Deal, which is 99.5% Jewish. So when making art, I think, one, we tend to minimize the Black contribution to everything and how there's an undercurrent of like everything comes from Black Southern pain, really. So without that, we wouldn't have much of anything. So I tend to gloss over it, and I think we do as a whole. But in everything we do because that current is there, I think every piece of colored art that I do recreate, every poem that I put to music, every Donny Hathaway piece that I reimagine, every Gil Scott-Heron piece that I get to read in front of people who have never even heard that before, and they're like, "Oh, what song is that?" Those are the sort of things that Western culture has helped us with, because people like it and they don't quite know why. It's just that undercurrent of the Black contribution with the Western still. So it's tricky to think about selling a product because we all got to make money. We're artists here, but we got to eat. The starving artist thing is cute when you were younger. It was really cute. We all got to eat here. So when I'm building a show and I'm writing these things, it doesn't really, I don't see that much of a fight and that much of a disparity between what I want to do as an entertainer and the messages I want to send to the audiences. And I'm able to sneak messages in as well. Like if you get it, you get it. If you don't get it, you don't get it, sort of thing. And then they could all talk about it at the bar afterwards.
Thank you, Jarrod. Grisel.
Yeah, I have this conversation a lot with my partner, and it's funny. The other day because most of my career I have painfully been outside of everything that's happening, right? Like people don't get my jokes at department meetings, and it's really wild. But the other day I was saying, you know what? At this point, I don't think anyone thinks I'm weird anymore. I think I'm actually normal at this point. And I don't know how true that actually is, but the reason that I say that is obviously we've gotten past the time when, you know, my hair was spiked up and people were literally shouting really horrible things at me when I walked down the street and throwing trash. I'm not even exaggerating. These are true things. We've gotten past that. But you know, my references, what I refer to, I've always felt that is a little bit harder for people to get. So for example, when people have a poem where they're referencing Beyonce or they're referencing Bad Bunny, a lot of people will get those cultural references. But if I'm referencing X-Ray Specs or, you know, La Lupe, it's a narrower audience. So it's really hard to negotiate that. And what I did a while back, and this was published in 2019, is I put together a collection called Latina Outsiders Remaking Latina Identity. And I kind of just wanted to find my people and they showed up. But even in that group, I still felt like I wish I could have found even like people even more on the margins of Latinidad. But another thing I have to say is it's interesting. I do think that there are people like La Lupe, for example, who was this performer who was very kind of wild in her way of being, where she'd take off her shoes and she'd throw her bracelets, and you just see her pain in her performance. And people thought she was nuts, and maybe there were some mental health things going on. But I find that these influences, you see them now, like you don't have people like Ricky Martin without Iris Chacon. You don't have people like Bad Bunny without people like La Lupe, which I'm doing all these music references because I really love music. But that said, all of these folks who have kind of cleared the path, they end up feeding the mainstream. So I'm not too concerned with the mainstream audience. I've just always done what I do. And it seems like somehow people end up catching up. And that's cool. I'm good with that.
Beautiful. Hanzi.
I'm still digesting our other panelists' thoughts. Yeah, I mean, a lot of good insights. And I'm trying to think, thinking about artwork and community. One thing I want to talk about is sort of like, right, the sort of taste and, and art history are sort of dictated by people in positions of power, right? There's tastemakers and a lot of people who wield influence, and that's sort of like why we see the artists that we see. And a lot of times it's just like networking, who knows who. So I think for me, right, like my whole sort of like art background and training is very much, influenced by like this sort of like typical Western tradition. And it took me, personally going out and seeking out, other forms of art, looking at Chinese art and bring that into the fold. And I recognize that my work is going to be for a particular audience. Like I want to be making artwork that I'm invested in and I care about. And I think that sort of specific, like cross section is going to be like queer Asian Americans. Like that's sort of my audience. And just I think I think most marginalized communities can relate to the artwork. They'll find a way, some sort of like point of entry. I guess I think of it as like, right, there's structures in place, right? There's a dominant narrative that sort of sets the pace for Western art history and what's considered good or bad. And it's also very good at even co-opting things as well. So like if we talk about like, if we're gonna go back to music, right? Like punk, which was counterculture, right? So much of counterculture ends up being co-opted by the mainstream and sanitized and turned into an acceptable form. Same thing with art. We can make the most radical, challenging art of our times. A lot of leftist like painters who create pieces of art that are denouncing capitalism are also owned by like giant corporations, and they're used as assets to be traded, right, financially. So that's, I think that can be disheartening in some ways, but I think for me, it's like, right, returning to this sense of community. If you find your community, like that's sort of the goal for my art, is just like, I'm making artwork for these people, figuring out the kinks of monetization, right? We'll still figure that out. I mean, that's also why I teach, like that's just like most of my income. But that way I feel like, that's very fulfilling, and making sure that my efforts and labor are serving my community.
Thank you. You actually did my segue for me. I wanted to kind of riffing off of this, thinking about like you are all also educators and teaching artists and professors, and you're enriching the lives of students of all backgrounds, nurturing young creatives who might be like you, might be different from you. So I'm wondering, like as an arts educator of color, like how do you navigate bringing your identities into these educational spaces and engaging your students in the context of their cultures?
So me.
Yeah, sorry, Jarrod.
That was right. I think it goes back to where I teach primarily in New Jersey are underserved communities. Both of my schools are in underserved communities. So it's a lot of kids that kind of look like me. And in the Black world, there's a lot of kids that are a lot darker than me. There's a lot of kids that are a lot lighter than me. So, I mean, a lot of that comes into play when I walk into a classroom. The white kids don't know that my mother's whiter than sheet of paper, and the Black kids don't know that my dad's blacker than night. You know what I mean? So I get to meet them on a whole bunch of different levels that they didn't even know were there when I start to speak. One, you don't necessarily, I can be stereotyped very easily. So if I walk into a room, you don't know what is going to come out of my mouth. So a lot of the kids, one, are shocked. And then especially the children of color are shocked that, and this because of where I teach, that I speak with eloquence. And I can speak in colloquialisms, and I can speak from the street too. Like my Spanish is de la calle, but we can relate on a whole bunch of different levels. So I'm able to just meet the kids wherever they are, because I am so many different things. I think it gives a leg up. And then for the students that don't have a person of color in their life, it can set a better example. If you have no one else in your life that looks like me, I hope I can be the one to bring you some education, some kindness. You know what I mean? Like I hope I can be an educator in your life. Or even, again, we are looked at as the people of our culture. I met this Black guy once, can be a sentence. So I would like to be that Black guy. As the teacher, I want to educate you. I want to be that. If I can be your cultural link to something, I'm more than happy to. Like Black History Month is my favorite month in these classrooms, where I have 3 little white kids in a town full of kids of color, and they have no one to talk to. And because of how I look, and I'm just light enough, and I speak the way their father does, not the way the rest of the kids in the classroom do. They feel like there's a different sort of connection that they can come and speak to me, and I'm more welcoming. I know that's a terrible, terrible thing on the whole, but it allows us to break down those walls. It's like it's just another lesson for them to take elsewhere. It allows us a leg up, I think, in breaking down barriers and teaching deeper lessons.
I just want to uplift that like less than 2% of teachers in the US are Black men. So it's probably so important for all of these students to see you and be educated by you, and to just be that. And I think, sorry, I just wanted to kind of speak to what you were saying. I think so many people who are biracial or multicultural end up being a bridge, sometimes whether they like it or not, whether they do it on purpose or not. And there's a lot of positive things our communities can do with that. You know, I mean, it's no surprise to me that our first Black president is a biracial person, right? Yeah, so thank you, Jarrod, for connecting with all those children in your classroom.
Thanks.
Grisel.
Hey, so I bring a variety of things into the classroom that not only represent me, but I hope represent the student population as well. I try to find out their backgrounds right on the first day, and I adjust and tweak based on that, because I think it's really important that they see someone represented in the readings or something like that, or some video that we view that maybe represents their culture if possible. But that said, the overwhelming majority of, I'm very fortunate in that I get to shape everything that I teach, even in my standard classes. So I teach Latino literature, and I teach creative writing, and I teach comp classes. So even in the comp classes, I pretty much get to shape everything I want. So everything that we read is mainly from people of color or queer folk. And I teach in the Bronx. So I feel that my students are pretty well represented in the readings. But that said, there are some particular voices that I try to introduce that give them perspectives that are not commonly lifted up as voices of color, right? So in the comp classes, I'll provide them an essay written by Emma Gonzalez, who was one of the survivors of the Parkland, I want to say Parkland shootings in Florida. She's an activist and this incredible speaker, and she's written essays that have been published widely. So not only is she coming at this tragedy from the perspective of a woman of color, a Latina, but then she's also queer. So they're getting a young voice, a voice that is kind of putting together all these different things. She's also an environmentalist, so she's putting all these things together in a really complex way for such a young voice, I think. I'll bring in voices like Daimba Jess. You know, a lot of people know, let's say Amanda Gorman, for example, as a prominent poet, but Daimba Jess has won a lot of literary awards, and he does this really interesting thing with writing where he does contrapunctals, but in multiple levels. So the way that you would have like a 12-sided die in Dungeons and Dragons, he'll have a poem that's 12, like you literally fold it and it's a 12-sided poem. I know, it's so cool, right? And because I'm into a lot of scientific ways of looking at literature and kind of bringing in science and math and all of that in it, I think he's a great representation. So he kind of really trips the students out a little bit, and they get excited about that. I bring in Alinda Segarra, who's the singer of Hooray for the Riff Raff. She has a song where she literally quotes Pedro Pietri, who's a godfather of Nuyorican poetry, and she's queer. So they're getting like multiple generations of this, I don't know, intersectionality, I guess. And then this is the one that I wanted to share, and this will be my last thing to say. In one of my classes, I want to say it's the Latino literature class. At the very end, I bring in the comedy of Julio Torres. He's a very weird comedian who also did this show called Los Spookies. And he has a new movie coming out called Problemista with, who's that very tall, amazing actress that looks like she's from another planet. I'm gonna forget her name right now. You're gonna put it in the chat and I'll remember. But anyway, he's really, really funny and has a very strange perspective on things. So again, the outsider perspective through people of color. That's what I try to do.
Beautiful. Thank you. I love that you're uplifting other artists in this space, bringing their energy in this space. Hanzi.
Yeah, I'll talk mostly about sort of teaching at Asian Arts Initiative. That's a really exciting opportunity for me. I think it's been a really healing experience, being able to provide a space that I would have wanted as a youth, to be, I grew up in pretty suburban New Jersey, and there were other Asian kids, but not necessarily creative Asian kids. We're all very academically focused, and it was all just about like the rat race of getting into a good school. I mean, I opted out. I went to art school, whatever. But all the same. So my role as an educator there, I have a really great team that supports me and they respect my judgment as an educator. So I've had a lot of freedom to sort of set the curriculum. And so there's elements of myself that I bring into it. So like the specific interests and, things that those are just things that I practice and I'm quite good at, right? So being familiar with traditional Chinese art forms, ink wash and calligraphy. And I wanted to expose these students to this stuff because it is part of the sort of like cultural tradition that they inherit, even though they might not be super familiar with it. But I enjoy teaching about that stuff and about the art history and the culture. But I also really enjoy giving them digital tools, right? So because I'm a digital native, I'm equally fluent in internet, which is how I keep up with the kids. They think they're like being slick, using memes or like using slang, and I'm like, I know what that means. Like, don't test me. I know. But so there's definitely a part of me that comes into the class, but I also know that like I think there's a difference between being a good artist and being a good arts educator. There's times where as an educator you have to set aside, I think, your ego. So as much as I like, these are things that I care about, I also want to listen to what the kids care about and what they're interested in. So yeah, if there's a particular art form or technique that they're interested in, I definitely like try to incorporate more of that. But also expanding outside of visual arts, outside of my wheelhouse of comfort, outside of my expertise. And it's kind of good because I get to bring sort of my more hobbyist practices into things. We've been doing a lot of culinary workshops. I'm a home cook, very interested in that stuff. And so like for Lunar New Year, which is coming up February 10th, so around that time, we're going to be doing a dumpling making workshop. And here's a way for me to like, honestly, back at home, like as a kid, I always just avoided like wrapping the dumplings because it was work, it was labor. But now it's like I get to come here and like teach the kids about the history and the tradition behind it and why we do this, what the significance of the ingredients are. A lot of Chinese ingredients, right, that we eat around Lunar New Year, they are the words, they sound like auspicious things. It's like, so it'll be like the shape of the dumpling is shaped like a gold ingot, so it's good fortune. Or like bai cai, which is right, cabbage, Chinese cabbage. Bai, it's like 100, right? So it's like a lot of things that just have to do with good fortune, wealth, etc. And these are just things that are, there's a tradition behind it. So getting to teach them about that heritage, that tradition, but also trying to empower them so that they can make the decisions about like what traditions we decide to keep, right? Because there's certain things where it's like, oh, I don't know, Confucianism is really patriarchal, so like maybe like we can do away with that. But right, there's also useful elements to history and tradition that we get to choose for ourselves and keep that.
I love that, Hanzi. I'm a quarter Chinese. I just started celebrating Lunar New Year last year. So I have to take your workshop because I cannot wrap the dumplings. I need all your, I'm gonna come to Asian Arts Initiative. I will disguise myself as a child. I'm very short. It's very easy.
I'll be right behind you. It won't be
All
so
right,
easy.
awesome. We're going to your house, Hanzi. You're gonna make us dumplings. We got plans for this. And then Michael and Grisel will be the DJs, of course. We're making friends, y'all. Speaking of our community, I would love to ask our panelists how we can better honor and support all artists and educators of color. Like what do y'all need to be seen as you fully are? I'm gonna toss it to Jarrod.
I, like the rest of the panelists, have a lot of freedom in what I get to teach. So, and in one of the places that I do teach, the faculty is very on board with everything that I do in the classroom. So if I give a homework assignment as like a music teacher or something like that, it would be maybe go home. A lot of I don't have very many African American students. I don't tend to use that term, but in my district, because of the recent like immigration like trends in New Jersey, at least in our area, I don't have very many African American students, which is a wonderful thing because I get to say, go home and ask your mom what she listened to in 1979. You know, we get to have those conversations with the little Haitian kid or the little kid from, you know, West Africa or, you know, or Lagos, like wherever these kids, we get to have those conversations. I mean, more musical support. I mean, really how you can support like teaching artists of color, I guess more musical support throughout the schools. And also just because of the trend of, like you said, 2% of teachers are Black men, or like mixed race, I think you said. The teaching artist angle for things, I think, is very, very, very important. The experience points that you have and develop over a career, as opposed to, you know, being afforded the opportunity to go to school. For a lot of the kids that I teach, for instance, you know, if they get involved in theater now and they're, excuse me, they're semi-pro by the time they're 18, 19, 20 years old. By the time they're 30, they should be, you know, if they're not performing anymore, they can be a teaching artist. I think a lot more of the less degree requirement sort of positions will allow a lot more kids from underserved communities to get a better foothold later on in life when it comes to, you know, having opportunities that don't necessarily require an immense amount of a degree. Let's just say, cut to the chase, a degree. If you're an artist, you're an artist, you're an artist. And as teaching artists, I'm afforded the opportunity to use my experience and my expertise to educate, as opposed to, you know, being forced into a space where I would now have to go back to school to get a different piece of paper. You know, like just opening that experience-driven education. Yeah, I think that's a very important thing. Where I'm at now with the kids that I see now, work with now.
Thank you, Jarrod. Grisel.
I think that the humanities in general, and artists in general, in the US, are just not, they're not respected, they're not funded nearly enough. And it's particularly frustrating when you're out and about and meeting new people, when folks, you tell people what you do and you can tell that they just don't respect that. I find it fascinating because there's still this stereotype that artists don't work. And if you're an artist of color, oh my gosh, how could you possibly have done that? And there's this assumption that your parents didn't support you because no people of color would ever support their child going into the arts. And there's just all these stereotypes about what being an artist is. And I think what would really help is for everyone on the planet to just have a different way of speaking about the arts and the humanities. These are things that we cannot live without. It's literally how we survived. We told each other stories in order to figure out how to live in the world. We created art so that we would remember things. Yeah, I just want people to fund us and to respect us and talk differently about us. That's it.
I love that. And yeah, art is life in so many things. Like Hanzi, you were talking about like the memes and the TikTok, and I was like, the internet is all art. All these videos and images that these, you know, young people make, even if it's a joke, that's art. It's wild. That's art. Anyway, Hanzi.
Yeah, I mean, right, we are constantly, I mean, that just want to follow this thread of we're right in our daily lives, we're constantly engaging with all these artifacts of, culture and creativity. And we should honor that. Um, it's I I do think we should, right? We need to put value in art. We need to fund it, right? That's just a matter of like practicality. Like, how can we actually tell people like art is important if we're not actually funding it? Again, that's the job for people in positions of power and with wealth. So uh, y'all get on that, whoever that is. Um, I think for us, I guess like for art educators and for artists of color, um, I think I want to circle back to something that we sort of touched on earlier. Certainly for me right now, um, one thing I've been sort of navigating or dealing with is the expectation of performing your identity or like making culturally specific work, right? So for me, it's like it just happens that my line of inquiry and the things that I'm interested in do touch on that, but I want to do it in an expansive way, right? Something that is able to express the subtlety and complexity of my own personal story, and isn't just representative of my whole community. Um, and in educating, my hopes is that students, right? I just want to give them the tool sets and the like skill sets to be able to explore and parse through their identity, um, and be able to make the work that they want to make. Um, and but if somebody just wants to make work that isn't like Chinese, like they should be able to do it because like white artists get to do that all the time, right? They don't have to be like, oh, I have to make white art. um you know so being able, for us, yeah, I mean, yeah, so artists of color, educators of colors, we should be free from that sort of like very narrow window into what our work should look like, and we should be able to pursue like whatever line of inquiry as we need, and obviously like through the pure basis of just our lived experience and what we've gone through, like those elements of our identity will show up in the work regardless. So yeah, we should be able to speak our personal truths. um yeah, just be our little weird selves.
Yes, our whole selves, our weird selves. I love that everybody's sharing their weirdness boldly. I think that's really cool. So my friends who are joining us and listening to the wisdom and richness and learning about the artistry of our panelists, we invite you to ask questions, or even if you just have a comment or something you want to say that really spoke to you, you could share it in the chat, or you can raise your hand. Michael Robertson Reed is on the lookout for your questions. I did see somebody already share, so I know there's at least one in there. But I'll give you more time to think of your questions and share them. I know sometimes it's scary. And while y'all are thinking, I do want to ask our panelists one last question that comes from my brain anyhow. So I always end my events with a wish, because I believe in manifesting like positive stuff after like we gather in community together. Where do we go from here? And kind of in the spirit of that, I wanted to ask all of you, what do you envision for BIPOC artists in their creative, their personal, their professional lives? And I'm gonna toss it to Jarrod.
Oh gosh.
If you
Would
need more
free
time, let me know.
maybe, I guess, yeah, would
Okay, I'll give you all a second, because I'm gonna share my wish and
wonderful,
vision
Summer.
for artists
Yes.
all the time. All the time is money. Money, like Hanzi was saying, the funding, but also we can put each other up, put each other on. So YA is a an organization that helps hundreds of artists get paid to do what they love, get paid to share their artistry with young learners. And it's really important to me to be part of that mission. I'm so happy to have our panelists here and to be giving y'all the dollars for sharing your experience, your wisdom, your artistry. And I think whenever we're in an opportunity to pass it on, we can. And certainly people who just love art, even if they're not artists, can do that. And I'm sure a couple of us can win the lotto, and please remember me because I manifested that for you. All right, so I'm gonna pass it to you, Jarrod.
Okay. I think we're all very lucky in the freedom that we do have and what we get to teach and how we get to educate. But I think more people could use that support. There's more organizations like this that are needed all over everywhere. And if you look at this panel, like a package like this that was sold to a school to educate over the course of a semester would be, like invaluable. You know, and it can start in the schools that have the money to do it, that already have the arts program that hasn't been stripped from them. You know, in New Jersey, it can be our privates, it can be our Randys, it can be our Princeton preps, it can be our, you know, to set a really nice example. More freedom for the rest of the people and money.
I would just love to see all artists of color feel free to do whatever they need to do, free of any hindrance in terms of location and age. So a lot of times we want to connect across countries and stuff. I know that we can sort of do that through Zoom. It's not the necessarily the most ideal way, but it would be great for us to be able to connect more. I know that needs funding too, so there's that. And I really would love more younger and older audience artists and audiences to connect. I recently taught a workshop where everyone was my elder, and I did not know that that was going to be the case. And it was amazing and it was great. And I loved that we were all coming at things from a different perspective in terms of era. So I hope that there will be no ageism, and we're free to learn in terms of that. Yeah.
Yes, dismantle the system. Hanzi.
Just gonna echo, yeah, money for, I mean, we need money to just like do our work, right? Like, because we gotta eat so that we can make the art. Yeah, I mean, it's sort of like, it's not really about like, oh, I want to have a bunch of money so I can go and like accumulate a bunch of like material belongings and like sit on a hoard like a dragon. Like that's not the goal of it, right? But it's just that we want to be able to make a living and be able to pursue our interest, which is art. And art is, I think, about community and connection. So once we get the money thing out of the way, then it's like, okay, yes, like as artists of color, we get to explore our identity, be able to present interesting questions or different perspectives and unique ways of looking at what it is to be, right, a person of color in our particular context, to find those sort of ways that our stories might have resonance and connection with people who might not have necessarily anticipated or seen that. I think, right, it's one thing, right, our sort of role as artists and educators of color is just to be there for our communities, our marginalized communities, just to assert ourselves and be like, hey, like this is an option, this is a path that is available to you if you want to seek it out, if you want to be an artist. Because I know for me growing up, it was like, I didn't have artists to look at to be like, oh, this is like a viable thing. I mean, believe it or not, as a kid, I actually wanted to be an actor. And I was also, I had a lot of I had body image issues as a kid. I felt I was like chubby. And so I was like, so I felt weird about that. I didn't want to do acting because of that. And I also didn't see like Asians in Hollywood, for example. That's just like a matter of representation. But yeah, I mean, even when I was doing art, it was like a way of like sort of being withdrawn, right, introverted, a way to still express myself and be creative in a way that felt comfortable. And I see in the chat, yes. Maybe I'll still, maybe I'll do acting. I don't know. We'll see. Yeah, I think it's just asserting our existence and hey, it's like saying we're here.
Beautiful. I'm sure coming to a movie screen near you, something we'll all write together and act in together after this. So I am excited to see some questions from folks. I see Jarrod, you're raising your hand. What's up?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, like, I think we all forget the power that we have. Like, we're the art teacher. You know what I mean? Do you remember walking into that classroom, like math is math, English is English, but you went to art or you went to music or you went to theater. Like, we like, and I think we all do forget it because we're passionate about what it is we're walking in there for, and we enjoy imparting that passion, you know. But we're also that kid's, you know, the highlight of a lot of their day. And I think we forget to give ourselves flowers sometimes. So to all of you guys, like, cheers, like you're that person for a lot of people. Cool.
That's so beautiful. Michael, do we have questions from our beautiful audience?
Yes, we do. We definitely have one question from Anna so far, and I will read it. I'm just pulling it up. Yes, this is from Anna. Question for the panelists. What recommendations do you have for others as they navigate their way forward? What do you need to move forward with your hopes and dreams? What keeps you going when things get tricky?
I can break the order. So what keeps me going and what I recommend for anyone wanting to move forward in the arts world is finding a community. I was shoving down my artist self when I got to college because I thought, oh, okay, now I have to get serious. I have to find a job that's going to make money. And I was absolutely miserable. And when I found an artist community, when I came to New York, and I gave myself the permission to do what I really wanted to do. It wasn't easy, but it was so much fun because I had these great artists around me all the time. And a lot of times it was scary. It can get scary when you feel like things might not be moving quickly enough for you. But as long as you keep making connections with people and learning from people and learning your craft, you're going to move forward. The world needs artists. It absolutely has told me that through my life. So just go and find those fun people that inspire you and learn from them and make friends, because they will get you gigs.
Hanzi.
Yeah, people really like I really enjoy my work at AAI and Fleischer. Like, they're both great communities, just to be surrounded by other artists and creatives, and also, yeah, I mean, specifically like artists of color. For me, the thing that sustains my drive to teach is I can have like the most awful, crummy like morning, wake up feeling like, oh, I don't want to go in, and then you know, I go to pick like the kids up, and they're just so excited to see me. Or sometimes they're not, and sometimes it's just like they got some. It'll just be like they run up and they have the most like wacky thing to say, and I'm just like, yo, life is okay. Like, I think like the big life-changing thing, like back in the day, like I don't think I never wanted to have kids, but like looking after students here is like, I think once you're responsible for like, you know, someone's like growth and development, and being able to sort of like guide them, you know, on a path, like that's really fulfilling. I think once you are able to find a line of work that like gives your life meaning, gives you like a drive to keep going, like that's going to sustain your practice. And I mean, community also, I have a really amazing team. They're all fantastic artists in their own right. They're also fantastic educators who are able to support me. Even when, you know, there's definitely days where it's like, you know, I'm running up against some challenge and they're able to like, you know, we'll tag each other out, or we're able to just talk about it afterwards. So really, I think people like are the ultimate, like, that's a support network. That's how you keep going. And I mean, yeah, we're social animals, you know. I don't think it's hard to just be alone. You gotta be able to rely on each other.
All right, third, finally. Nice, I like that. I echo everything else. The community part is huge. Very few people in the world, there are very few other careers that you throw yourself into for love and love alone, or passion and passion alone, or I can't not. And then whatever happens after that happens. You know, you don't go to med school and finish and then I guess I'll be a doctor. Like that's not kind of like we we throw ourselves into this wholeheartedly. So for me, I always go back to why I started doing anything in the first place. I know it was a Lexus commercial that made me pick up the saxophone. I saw Guys and Dolls that made me start singing. I saw Benny Goodman lead a band in black and white. That's why I picked up the clarinet when I was. So I remember why I started doing anything. And that's anytime I see a new student, I say, why are you here? So identifying why you started doing any of this in the first place. And I think for most of us, if you're here, it's because you couldn't do anything else. And that's really, really important to hold on to, because this business is this business. And in every aspect, visual art, digital art, everything, it's terrible. So it's very important to hold on to that. And misery loves company is not such a terrible phrase. I mean, if you can be miserable with the person next to you who was at the same crappy audition that you were the day before, we can all understand this. Like misery can be an okay thing because we can cry together and help each other out. Again, with the community thing. Hold on to why you're doing this at all.
I love that. That's really beautiful. So I do want to let folks know we have a special treat for anyone who stays until the end. We'll have a performance of a poem by Dr. Grisel Yolanda Acosta. I just like saying your whole name. But if anyone else has any questions, you can pop them in. If you want to raise your hand and say it audibly instead, we have time for one more. Or we can hold this space together. That's okay too. I also want to encourage our panelists, if there's anything you'd like to share as far as websites, socials, any ways to connect with people, you can toss them in the chat and I'd be happy to pass them on too. If you want to stay private, that's also very cool. You can be mysterious. Sometimes it's a fun option to have in a digital world. We have a question from Carl. Go ahead, Carl.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for your time and for sharing your art. I have a question. What advice would, when you're in these spaces where there's faculty full-time who are not of color, yet they teach classes that are comprised of predominantly students of color. What advice do you leave with them, or can we share with them on how their approach to teaching their art can be more culturally responsive?
Anyone can hop in.
Sure. Be you. I think that's it. Like, I love you. I just see your name and I don't know what you look like and any of that. And that's why this statement is ever more like powerful. Just be you. I don't know that there's anything more to, in my schools, all of the faculty in both of my underserved schools, the three that I've been, the three that I've been in, most recently, all of the educators are female and white. So there is no, and mostly fresh out of school. So there is no connection point for a lot of these kids. So I do see the teachers look to me, even some of the older teachers in some of the schools that are not of color. They look for how to interact as if there's a different way to interact. So that's why I say, just go in there and be yourself. You know what I mean? I don't think like we can acknowledge the code switch. I don't know that that's, you know what I mean? There's how you connect with the kids is how you connect with your kids. But I really think it just comes down to showing them there is no real, you know, it's not that teacher's job to handle that aspect. If you're in there for 45 minutes a week, you can inject some of yourself in there, you know what I mean? And take them by the hand and pat their back for that 45 minutes. But I don't, you know, I just leave the room with my energy.
Thank you.
In terms of the literary arts, I see a lot of folks who are trying to have a diverse array of readings. So I appreciate that. What I see might hurt students is not so much the content or even the way in which the teachers or professors interact with the students, because I think a lot has changed in that respect. So I appreciate that, at least in this area. I don't know, I can't speak to other areas. It was pretty bad when I grew up in Chicago in terms of how teachers would treat students of color. But what I see now is how are you shaping your assignments and how are you grading them? I see a lot, especially again in the literary arts and English departments. I see a lot of folks that are really focused on young learners having perfect English skills. And you know, my dad went to Ivy League schools and never had perfect English skills, and he passed. So if we're keeping students behind because we're focused on, we're not really looking at what they're communicating, we're just looking at technical things that honestly, AI can fix that at this point. We don't need to be concerned about that. That's a problem. So I would say encourage folks to grade in a different way that is realistic.
So for me, you know, I've never taught in like a public education system, so I'm not really sure necessarily what context, Carl, the question you're asking is for. But I can sort of just talk about, yeah, I mean, very broadly, like, so for my program, right, we're an after school program, so we're not assessing them, we're not grading them. We're just basically, and you know, they're already tired of school by the end of it. You know, they've done a full day of school, they're coming in, and so it's more. I think of it as enrichment, right? Giving them just like another thing, right, to sort of like fill the time and, you know, do something that's that I don't know, like they don't necessarily get that much art programming in their school experience, but what I will say is that if, you know, regardless of identity of, you know, the identity of the educator, I think it's important, right, to come in and extend gratitude, respect, and dignity to everyone, regardless of, you know, whatever identity they have. And it's, I mean, for me, it's like, yes, I can, yes, I know. It's like, okay, with my kids, it's like, okay, yes, I know what TikTok you're referencing. It's fine. But you know, there's also students where it's like, oh, we might not necessarily have the same references, or we might not necessarily be able to connect on every level, right? I also have students who are not Asian in my program, and I don't really necessarily see that as an obstacle or a challenge necessarily, because it's just like yeah, like my role as an educator and a facilitator is just, I'm going to be bringing in, you know, this stuff. And you're going to approach it whichever way you can, right? Whatever point of entry you're coming from. That being said, visual arts, if you're talking about, you know, if you're giving like assignments or, you know, projects that are based in art history, it's like, yes, we can move away from Picasso inspired and we can move away from Rothko and move and just like, yeah, I think representation is a big thing. Just like show some other artists who might be outside the sort of like mainstream canon. I think that's a good place to start. So that just involves a bit more research on the educator's part. I think that's it.
Thank you.
I love it. Thank you, Carl, for bringing that question into our hemisphere. So sorry, we're a little bit over time, but I hope that folks can stay for a poem by Grisel. I'm going to share a link to the presentation for today if you'd like to read along. But in the meantime, I'm going to have the rest of us fade away into the spotlight. I'll put the spotlight on you, Grisel. Please take us out. And thank you to all of our panelists and our audience members for being with us here today. We're so glad that you could be here with us, hear the wisdom and incredible artistry of our performers and panelists. And with a poem called Invented Phobias, this is Dr. Grisel Acosta.
Thank you. Invented phobias. Fearlessness is rampant. Powerful people with ripped thighs and high noses built to inspire daring depths of charisma and assured behavior like fly drops out of planes, insta contortions, and flimsy research reels. So maybe embrace un poquito de fear. If you have no phobias, here are some for you. Aquí tienes. Chlorophobia. Fear the flock of green feathers on the tree waving to you every evening, for they hold the air that sways the dance of your lungs. Surfextrophobia. Fear the wall of water surging toward you when centuries of mountains beneath the sea carelessly decide their catnap needs a cozy stretch. Sludgeophobia. Fear the squish of the muddy dirt, always ready to yield vitamin harvest of strawberries and squash, like magic. Circumferencephobia. Fear the spinning of the earth, the twist of the solar system, the wave-waking moon, all keeping you planted. Lusophobia. Fear the twinkle of star data informing your nights, the burn of solar fire transforming skin into prisms, the light of existence. But more than anything, loneophobia. Fear all these systems working together to create population, fields and fields of recycled life, making sure that every day I get to see you. Thank you.
Yes, everyone give it up for Grisel. Show your love in the chats. I want to thank everyone today for being here with us, working together and sharing your own experiences. Thank you so much, Hanzi, Grisel, Jarrod. You guys are rock stars, and we're so blessed to have you in our community here. Yeah, so please stay tuned. We will be sending out a recording and the slides to folks who registered, and there will be more people experiencing this. Hello to our friends in the future from the past. I hope everyone has a wonderful, wonderful weekend, and that this brings you into our period of hopefully rest in great spirits. Thank you so much, everyone.